In the remote abyss of space, a place so God-forsaken that even God forgot to forsake it, sat listening post Z-107. It was a rust bucket masquerading as a station, a lonely outpost where the universe sent its cosmic junk mail. Captain Marin Weiler, a woman whose optimism could be measured in negative integers, stared out the viewport at the endless black, wondering if she'd ever see a sunrise that wasn't artificial. "You know, Marin," crackled the voice of Lieutenant Jax Murdoch over the comm, "they say space is the final frontier, but I figure we just lost the map." "Jax, if you're trying to make me nostalgic for Earth, it's working," Marin replied, her voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that would rust metal. "Have you got anything interesting, or are we still collecting signals from lonely satellites looking for pen pals? Well, if you call interesting more static than a cheap radio, then yes. But this time, we might have stumbled on something." Marin perked up, or at least as much as one could when gravity was optional. She pushed off from the console and floated toward the control room where Jax was hunched over his display like a man trying to decipher the secrets of the universe, or at least pretending to, so he didn't have to listen to Marin's monologue. "I swear if this is another prank," Marin began, "I'll vent your coffee stash into space." Jax smirked, swiveling his chair around. "I'd die first. But seriously, take a look at this." He tapped the console and a series of jagged lines appeared, the kind that would make a seismograph look calm. Marin squinted at the screen. "Looks like my heart rate during a budget meeting." "Nah, this is actually interesting," Jax replied, ignoring her quip. "Dr. Rowe's gonna love this one. It's got that ancient alien vibe she's always yammering about." Dr. Tamsin Rowe, resident xenorchaeologist and the only person aboard who seemed to actually enjoy their isolation, was currently elbow-deep in what could only be described as a jigsaw puzzle from hell, an alien artifact they'd picked up on their last supply run. She didn't even look up when Marin and Jax entered. "Hey, Doc," Marin called. "We've got a signal that might make you squeal like a schoolgirl. If it's anything less than the meaning of life," Tamsin muttered, her voice muffled by a headpiece that resembled something out of a B-grade sci-fi flick, "I'm not interested." Jax tapped the console, pulling up the signal waveform. "Check it out." "Ancient alien civilization, maybe." Rowe finally looked up, her eyes lighting up with the kind of joy that only comes from potentially groundbreaking discoveries, or finding out there's still ice cream in the mess hall freezer. This is something," she said, more to herself than to them as she leaned in closer. "These patterns, they're not random." "Great," Marin said, crossing her arms. "So we're not alone in the universe, and they're probably just as bored as we are." Tamsin ignored the jab, already lost in her own thoughts. "We need to run this through the big scanner," she said, her voice brimming with uncharacteristic excitement. "Big scanner it is," Jax said, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Let's see if the Ancient Ones left us a message or just pocket lint from eons past." The control room buzzed with an unusual energy, the kind that comes from the promise of the unknown. As the signal processed, Marin watched Tamsin pace back and forth, muttering to herself in a dialogue that only she could follow. "Jax, have you ever wondered why we keep doing this?" Marin asked, eyes fixed on the swirling abyss outside. Jax shrugged. "Beats working in a call center." "Barely," Marin replied, a smirk tugging at the corners of her mouth. The scanner beeped, snapping everyone's attention back to the console. Tamsin practically shoved Jax aside in her eagerness. "What do we have?" Jax wriggled back into place, gesturing at the screen. "Well, it's not a recipe for peace in our time, but it's definitely a message." "A message?" Marin echoed, raising an eyebrow. "From who?" "The Universal Complaint Department." Tamsin was too absorbed in the data to respond, her eyes flicking across the screen as if it held the secrets of the universe. "This language, it's structured but alien." "No kidding," Jax said, leaning back with that self-satisfied air of someone who just managed to make a breakthrough without actually doing the work. "So, Doc, is this where you save the universe or just get us into more trouble?" "More trouble," Marin predicted. "It's always more trouble." Tamsin was already typing furiously, algorithms running on the screen like ants across a picnic table. "I need to decode this," she said, more to herself than anyone else. Marin shook her head, half in amusement, half in exasperation. "Well, you do that. Meanwhile, Jax and I will be here, pessimistically waiting for the universe to implode." "Or explode," Jax added helpfully. "I'm flexible." "Of course you are," Marin replied dryly. The signal continued to unfold on the screen, a puzzle box of alien origin that defied easy solutions. It was the kind of mystery that could drive lesser minds to madness, but for Tamsin Rowe, it was an invitation to dance with the devil, or whatever passed for a devil in this corner of the galaxy. As the hours ticked by, the station hummed with an intensity it hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. The signal was their new sun, casting its strange light into every corner, every shadow. It was a puzzle, a promise, a threat, all wrapped up in one. And as Marin watched Tamsin work, she couldn't help but wonder what lay at the heart of this alien message. Was it knowledge, power, or the cosmic equivalent of a whoopee cushion? Whatever it was, it had their attention now. "Hey, Captain," Jax said, breaking the silence that had settled like dust. "You ever wonder if maybe we should just ignore the universe?" Marin chuckled, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Every damn day, Jax. Every damn day." They both turned back to the screen, where the alien signal danced its cryptic dance, oblivious to the chaos it had sparked in the hearts of those who dared to listen. "Doctor," Tamsin Rowe was still glued to her screen, fingers flying across the keyboard like a caffeinated spider on a sugar high. Marin and Jax leaned against the consoles, waiting for something more illuminating than static and cosmic graffiti. It was the kind of waiting that quickly turned into an Olympic event in boredom. "So, Captain," Jax drawled, leaning back in his chair with a grace that suggested he might have been a cat in a previous life, "what do you think's in that signal?" "Galactic lottery numbers. An invitation to the universe's worst party, knowing our luck. Probably just an advert for cosmic insurance." Marin shot back, her eyes still fixed on Tamsin's display. "Or maybe the alien version of spam." But behind the sarcasm, there was something unsettling about the signal. It wasn't just the cryptic message or the eerie hum that accompanied it, but a creeping unease settling over the station like a cold mist. Even the coffee tasted wrong, and when your only joys were sarcasm and caffeine, this was saying something. As if summoned by the collective misgivings of the crew, Beck Rin, the station's engineer, appeared. His usual demeanor was that of someone who'd rather be fixing a toaster than dealing with people, but today he seemed even more out of sorts, a feat in itself. Beck, Marin greeted with the enthusiasm reserved for finding a sock in the lost laundry. "What's the damage, besides the fact we're still floating in a recycled tin can?" Beck replied, his voice dry as the Martian desert. "The signal's messing with the systems." Marin frowned, a look that made her seem like she was contemplating whether to incinerate a faulty circuit or the person who built it. "Our systems, yeah. Ventilation's on the fritz, and I'm getting some weird readings from the nutrient dispensers. Thought it was a glitch, but..." Beck rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that suggested he'd rather be wrestling a rabid space weasel. "Great." As if food paste wasn't already an abysmal experience, Jax muttered, shaking his head. "Now it might come with extra mutations. And there's more," Beck continued, his tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere but there. "I think it's messing with us too. Physically." Marin arched an eyebrow, the universal sign for explain before I throw you out the airlock. Beck hesitated, his reluctance as palpable as the layer of grease perpetually under his nails. "I've been monitoring the crew's biosigns, standard protocol, you know, but I'm seeing these cravings for things we don't have, things we shouldn't want. It's like the signal's altering our..." "I dunno biology." "Fantastic," Jax said, throwing his hands up. "So now we're not just bored and isolated, we're also craving God knows what." Alien junk food, maybe. Or alien brain parasites, Marin added with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. Tamsin finally looked up from her screen, eyes wide with the kind of manic glee that suggested she'd either found something groundbreaking or her sanity had finally packed its bags. "This isn't random," she insisted, gesturing at the gibberish filling her monitor. "These patterns there—" Yeah, Beck interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "Patterns signals the meaning of life. Can we focus on the part where we all turn into alien puppets?" "Strangely optimistic of you," Marin noted, sarcasm dripping like a leaky faucet. "But if this signal is messing with our heads, we need a solution." "Fast." "Agreed," Tamsin said, for once more focused on the practical than the theoretical. "We need to decode this message completely, figure out its purpose." Marin nodded. "Beck, work on shielding our systems. Jax, keep monitoring for any changes. And Tamsin, keep at it, figure out what this signal wants from us." The crew dispersed like oil on water, each off to tackle their assigned tasks. The station, usually a bastion of monotony, now buzzed with an electric tension. It was the kind of day that made you question your life choices, like signing up for this cosmic purgatory in the first place. Hours passed, each minute stretching into an eternity that would have made a snail feel productive. The only sounds were the hum of machinery and the occasional curse from Beck as he fought with the station's ancient systems. Jax was the first to break the silence, mostly because silence was his natural enemy. "Hey, Cap, you ever think maybe the universe is just one big cosmic joke?" he asked, swiveling his chair lazily. "Yeah, and we're the punchline," Marin replied, her eyes fixed on the viewport where stars hung like forgotten pinpricks. "You're not wrong," Jax conceded, returning his focus to his console, where the alien signal continued its relentless dance. Meanwhile, Beck was deep in the bowels of the station, surrounded by wires, circuits, and the smell of something distinctly burnt. He was muttering to himself, a habit born of too much time alone and not enough social interaction. "Stupid alien tech," he grumbled, yanking at a particularly stubborn cable. "Can't just send a normal message, no, it's gotta be all cryptic and life-threatening." A sudden clatter made him pause, and he realized with a start that his stomach was growling with a ferocity that suggested it had a mind of its own. It wasn't just hunger, it was a craving. Something rich, something tangy. Something alien. "Damn it," Beck muttered, realizing he was caught in the same web as the rest. He straightened up, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit and cursing the universe for its infinite capacity to screw with him. Back in the control room, Tamsin was making progress, her eyes alight with an energy that was equal parts mania and caffeine. "I think I've got something," she announced, drawing everyone's attention. "Please tell me it's the cure for space-induced insanity," Jax quipped, though his eyes were hopeful. "Not quite," Tamsin replied, a mischievous grin tugging at her lips. "But I've deciphered part of the message. It's instructions." Marin echoed, her skepticism palpable. "For what exactly?" "How to build a better rusty bucket, more like how to adjust," Tamsin said, her voice laced with intrigue. "The signal's designed to alter neural pathways. It's trying to change us." "Change us into what?" Beck asked, having rejoined them with an expression that suggested he'd been elbow-deep in systems and regrets. "Not sure yet," Tamsin admitted, biting her lip. "But it's definitely not a random transmission. So, aliens are trying to rewire our brains," Jax summarized, leaning back with a sigh. "Good thing the warranty's expired." Marin rubbed her temples, a futile attempt to stave off the headache that was rapidly becoming a permanent feature. "We need to stop this." "Block the signal, or at least mitigate its effects," Beck nodded, already considering the possibilities. "I'll work on a dampening field. Might not stop it completely, but should reduce its impact." "Good," Marin replied, her voice firm. "Let's move, people." I'm not letting some alien signal turn us into its personal science project. With new determination, the crew set to work. The station had become a flurry of activity, not the mindless routine of maintenance and survival, but a desperate dance to reclaim their autonomy. Each of them felt the pull of cravings, a nagging whisper at the back of their minds urging them towards something unknown and unwanted. Beck was the first to implement a solution, rigging a makeshift dampening field from spare parts and a creativity born of necessity. It wasn't pretty, but it hummed with a potential that suggested it might just work. As the field powered up, the station seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if this patchwork miracle would stave off the alien assault on their minds and bodies. "Feels like we're in a bad sci-fi movie," Jack said, watching the lights flicker with a bemused expression. "The kind where everyone dies at the end." "Hopefully not today," Marin replied, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 decisions and one too many cups of terrible coffee. The dampening field took hold, a subtle shift in the air that was more felt than seen. The cravings dulled, a minor victory in a battle they hadn't signed up for but were determined to win. "Seems to be working," Beck noted, his tone a mix of relief and disbelief. "At least for now." "Good," Marin said, allowing herself a rare moment of hope. "Keep monitoring. This might buy us time." As the crew settled back into their tasks, the alien signal continued its haunting serenade, a reminder that while they might have gained a reprieve, the true purpose of the message remained as elusive as ever. "Think the aliens will send us a thank you note?" Jax asked, breaking the renewed silence with his trademark irreverence. "Maybe," Marin replied with a smirk. "Or they'll just send a bigger signal." "That's the spirit," Jax said, shaking his head with a grin. Always looking on the bright side, Marin just chuckled, a sound like broken glass tinkling in the darkness. "Yeah, I'm a regular ray of sunshine." As the station hummed around them, the crew of listening post Z-107 found themselves in the thick of a mystery that was as dangerous as it was intriguing. The universe, it seemed, was not content to let them drift in monotony. Instead, it offered a challenge wrapped in enigma, and while they might not be heroes, they were stubborn enough to see it through. "Hey, Marin," Jax said, glancing over. "Think maybe we're the ones who lost the map, or is the universe just screwing with us?" "Little bit of both, I reckon," she replied, watching the stars with a gaze that was equal parts defiance and resignation. And as they faced the vast unknown, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that whatever awaited them, it was only the beginning. The cosmos was calling, and they were all ears. The station's corridors were quiet, save for the occasional rumble of machinery and Marin Weiler's muttered curses as she made her rounds. The dampening field had dulled the cravings, but the crew wasn't out of the frying pan yet. More like they'd crawled out and landed directly into the fire. Jax leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, gazing at the ceiling as if it held the secrets to the universe. "You know," he drawled, "I always thought if I went mad in space, it'd at least come with some killer hallucinations. Dragons flying around, maybe a giant donut trying to eat me. Not this slow descent into broccoli cravings." Marin snorted. "Be careful what you wish for. We might end up with a kale addiction. In that case, shoot me," Jax said deadpan as he straightened up. "So what's next, boss?" "We wait for more cravings until one of us eats the airlock." Before Marin could respond, Tamsin's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, you might want to come see this. I've found something interesting. Please tell me it's not another hidden message about how to turn us into cosmic salad dressing," Marin replied, already on her way to the lab. Tamsin met her at the door, eyes wide with excitement, or was it hysteria? "I've run an analysis on the signal patterns. This might be more than just a random transmission." "Of course it is," Marin said dryly. "Nothing in our lives is ever random." Tamsin ignored the sarcasm. "The signal's not just altering us. It's sophisticated, like it's designed to entice and trap us. It's got hooks, Captain. Neural hooks." Marin crossed her arms, her expression a mix of annoyance and weary curiosity. "So we're fish and this signal's the bait. Wonderful. Next you'll tell me the aliens are planning a cosmic fish fry." "Maybe not a fish fry," Tamsin said, her voice tinged with an unsettling excitement, "but it's possible this is a trap set by a more advanced species to study us. See how we tick? Great. We're lab rats in a giant cosmic experiment," Marin muttered. Just what I needed to hear today, Tamsin shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Think of it as an opportunity. If we can decode it fully, maybe we can turn the tables, or we could just cut the damn thing off before it turns us into space zombies, Marin countered, her voice flat. Jax sauntered in, drawn by the sound of rising tension. What's this about space zombies? Sounds like my kind of party. We're debating our next move, Marin explained, gesturing at Tamsin. Genius over here thinks we can use the signal to our advantage. Jax tilted his head, considering. Well, why not? If someone's watching, might as well give him a show. Or we could, not risk our brains getting scrambled for alien entertainment, Marin shot back. Beck entered the room, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that looked like it had seen better centuries. Signal's still strong, Captain. Dampening field's holding, but it's a patch job at best. Adds to the charm, Jack said, winking. Beck grunted, unimpressed. Charm's not gonna save us if the field fails. We need something permanent, Marin sighed, rubbing her temples again. All right, everyone. We've got a choice. Do we dig deeper into this signal, or do we shut it down before it does more damage? The room fell silent, each crew member lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't an easy decision. The promise of uncovering hidden knowledge was tempting, but so was the very real risk of losing themselves in the process. I say we dig, Jax said finally, breaking the silence. We're here anyway, right? Might as well see what secrets these aliens are hiding. Always the thrill-seeker, Marin muttered. What about you, Tamsin? The scientist was practically vibrating with excitement. We dig. We've come this far, and shutting it down feels like giving up. Beck, Marin asked, turning to the engineer. Beck shrugged, his expression calculating. I'll support whatever decision we make. But if we're going to dig, we'd better be ready for whatever we find. Marin nodded, feeling the weight of leadership settle heavily on her shoulders. All right then. We dig. But no more risks than necessary. If things start going sideways, we pull the plug. The crew dispersed, each heading off to prepare for the next stage of their ill-advised adventure. Marin lingered, staring out the viewport at the endless sea of stars. It had once been a comforting sight, a reminder of her insignificance in the grand scheme. Now, it felt more like a judgmental audience. Back in the main control room, Jax set up a mock stage, complete with a spotlight fashioned from an old desk lamp. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, he announced to no one in particular. Tonight's feature, Humans versus the Unknown. Beck rolled his eyes, tinkering with the dampening field controls. Keep it up, Jax, and I'll let the field fail just to see what happens, noted. Jax replied with a grin. So, Captain, any last words before we embark on our grand voyage into the unknown? Marin chuckled darkly, shaking her head. Yeah. I hope the aliens have a good sense of humor. As the crew settled in, Tamsin dove back into her work, fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that suggested caffeine was her true blood type. Lines of data scrolled by, each more confusing than the last, but she was determined to crack the code. Jax lounged at his console, monitoring the signal's fluctuations. If this is a trap, it's pretty well devised. I mean cravings. That's some psychological warfare right there. I'm just hoping they don't send a telepathic memo with a recipe for disaster and a side of chaos, Marin said, watching the starfield with narrowed eyes. Beck adjusted the dampening field, his focus absolute. Just keep the jokes coming, Jax. Might be the only thing keeping us sane. The Iors crawled by, the station a hive of concentrated effort. The alien signal pulsed relentlessly, a cosmic siren's call that refused to be ignored. Captain, I think I've got something, Tamsin said suddenly, her voice cutting through the haze of tension. Finally some good news, Marin said, moving to stand behind her. What have you found? Tamsin gestured at the screen, where a pattern had emerged from the chaos. These aren't just random instructions, they're customizable. We can actually program them to target specific neural pathways. Great, Jax chimed in. So we can give ourselves whatever mental illness we want. Sign me up for the one where I think I'm a rock star, Or we could use it to reinforce our resistance, Tamsin suggested. Make ourselves immune to its effects. Marin considered the possibility. It was a gamble, one that could either free them from the signal's influence or drive them deeper into its clutches. How confident are you in this? About as confident as I am that this coffee is more engine oil than caffeine, Tamsin replied, holding up her mug with a wry smile. Jax chuckled. That's about as reassuring as a leaky spacesuit. All right, Marin said, a decision forming. If we're going to do this, everyone needs to be aware of the risks. It's not just our sanity on the line, it's our lives. Beck looked up from his work, frowning. And if it doesn't work, then we cut the signal and go back to our regular, mind-numbingly boring lives, Marin replied, her tone resolute. Tamsin's fingers danced over the console, adjusting parameters and setting the system up for their bold experiment. The crew watched, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension in their eyes. Ready? Tamsin asked, looking at Marin for the final go-ahead. Marin nodded. Do it. With a deep breath, Tamsin activated the program. The station shuddered, lights flickering as the signal's power surged through their systems. For a moment, it felt like they were on the brink of something monumental or cataclysmic. The tension in the room was palpable, a living thing that thrummed in the air. Each crew member felt the shift, the momentary disorientation as their minds adjusted to the new neural pathways being formed. Well, I don't feel any dumber, Jax said, breaking the silence with a nervous laugh. Beck grunted, tapping at his console, and the dampening field still holding. That's something. Marin let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. All right, let's keep monitoring. If anyone starts feeling off, we abort. Hours passed, the crew on edge as they waited for any sign of success or disaster. The cravings remained subdued, a hopeful indication that their gamble had paid off. I think it's working, Tamsin said finally, her voice tinged with relief. The signal's influence is decreasing. Marin nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Good. Maybe we're not just lab rats after all. Jax leaned back, a satisfied smirk on his face. Looks like the universe picked the wrong group of misfits to mess with. Beck rolled his eyes, but there was a hint of a smile on his lips. For now, at least. Let's hope it stays that way. As the crew settled back into their routines, the alien signal continued to pulse in the background, a reminder of the challenges they'd faced and the battles still to come. Think the aliens will be impressed? Jax asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Who knows, Marin replied, watching the stars drift by. But at least we've given them something to think about. And as the station hummed with renewed purpose, the crew of listening post Z107 braced themselves for whatever the universe had in store next. So, we're playing space detectives now. Fancy that, Jax quipped, leaning back in his chair with the kind of insouciance that suggested he'd won the galactic lottery. He hadn't, but the idea of hunting down the source of the signal was almost as appealing. Almost. More like dysfunctional space detectives, Marin corrected, her voice flat as a pancake squashed under a hover truck. And we're not even getting paid. Who needs money when you've got existential dread and a malfunctioning nutrient dispenser? Jax shot back, with a grin that could power a small solar panel. His eyes drifted to the console. Speaking of which, my mind is craving something that doesn't taste like recycled cardboard. Join the club, Beck muttered from his corner, his fingers dancing over the dampening field controls with the precision of a concert pianist. A very grumpy concert pianist. But the field's holding for now, so let's not all panic at once. Marin sighed, rubbing her temples like she was trying to massage some sense into the universe. All right, folks, focus. We need to find the source of this signal before it turns our brains into pudding. Delicious pudding, Jax added unhelpfully. Pudding aside, Tamsin interjected, her eyes glued to the screen as if it held the secrets of life, the universe, and everything. I'm working on narrowing down the signal's origin. Just need a bit more time. Marin nodded, turning to face the viewport. The stars blinked back, indifferent to the tiny dramas playing out on listening post Z107. Time's the one thing we don't have in abundance, Tamsin. Yeah, well, tell that to the aliens. Maybe they'll start billing us by the hour, Beck grunted, his eyes barely leaving his work. Jax pretended to hold an imaginary phone to his ear. Hello, yes, aliens. Can you put us on a payment plan for the impending doom you sent our way? Keep joking, Jax, Marin said dryly. I'd hate for this situation to get too serious, too serious. Jax echoed, feigning shock. Heaven forbid we take our slow descent into madness seriously. Marin shook her head, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth despite the situation. All right, team. Let's split up and get our ducks in a row, or whatever passes for ducks out here. Jax, see if you can keep our systems from going haywire again. Beck, make sure the dampening field doesn't give up and join a union. Tamsin, keep it that signal. I'm going to run a systems check. The crew scattered like marbles on a tilting board, each heading off to their respective tasks. The station hummed with a kind of nervous energy, a tension that thrummed just beneath the surface. It was a song of desperation, one they all knew by heart now. Marin paced the corridors, her footsteps echoing hollowly in the empty metal halls. It was the sound of isolation, of a place where hope came to die and cynicism reigned supreme. Not that she minded. Cynicism was her comfort zone. Back at the comms station, Jax fiddled with the controls, humming tunelessly. Hey, Captain, he called over the intercom, if the universe explodes, can I have your coffee mug? Sure, Jax. It's yours, Marin replied, not missing a beat, but only if you promise to use it to hold something more valuable than our sanity. Like, I don't know, engine grease deal. Meanwhile, Tamsin was deep in her own world, her fingers flying across the keyboard as if she were conducting a symphony of chaos. Damn it, she cursed softly, eyes scanning the endless lines of code. This thing's trickier than a politician at a truth-telling contest. Beck, ever the vigilant guardian of their fragile sanity, was checking the dampening field's integrity. Good news, he announced to no one in particular, the field's still working. Bad news, I'm pretty sure it hates me. Join the club, Jax called back, giving a mock salute. Membership, everyone on the station. As hours ticked by like a funeral march, the crew's patience wore thinner than the station's budget for morale. Sleep came in fits like an indecisive lover, and when it did, it brought dreams of signals and shadows. Things far beyond the comprehension of mere mortals. Captain, Tamsin's voice crackled over the comm, I've got a lead on the signal's origin. It's coming from a sector not too far from here. Coordinates uploaded to your console, Marin sighed, feeling an odd mix of relief and trepidation. Thanks, Tamsin. Let's see what fresh hell awaits us. Gathering the crew in the cramped control room, Marin addressed them with the kind of enthusiasm normally reserved for tax audits. All right, team, we've got a lead on the signal source. It's time to see what's out there, and by out there you mean more bad decisions and poor life choices, Jax offered. Exactly, Marin confirmed with a dry smile. And remember, folks, safety third. We're here for answers, not a guided tour of the cosmic zoo, Beck snorted, adjusting his tool belt. Can't wait to see the freak show waiting for us out there. With the coordinates locked in, the station rumbled to life, its engines protesting the sudden burst of energy like an old man begrudgingly getting out of bed. The crew braced themselves, each nursing their own private cocktail of hope, fear, and caffeine. As the station hurtled towards the signal's origin, the atmosphere inside grew tense, like the air before a storm. The kind of tension that could snap and break things like hearts, minds, or maybe just a few pieces of overpriced equipment. Approaching the coordinates, Tamsin announced, her tone as clinical as ever. No obvious signs of life or death. Yet Jax added, ever the optimist. Marin peered at the view screen, her eyes narrowing as the blackness of space gave way to the outline of something. What in the name of all things holy and unholy is that? Floating in the void was a structure, a twisted, spindly thing that seemed to defy reason and possibly several laws of physics. It was alien in the truest sense, a nightmare made manifest in metal and shadow. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Beck muttered, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. "Welcome to the big leagues, folks," Jax declared, clapping his hands together. "Where the points are made up and sanity doesn't matter. Tamsin, any readings?" Marin asked, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her insides. "Some kind of power source, but it's weird," Tamsin replied, squinting at the screen like it might suddenly start making sense. "Definitely not human tech. And there's a lot of interference." "Of course there is," Marin sighed. "Wouldn't want things to be too easy, right?" "Easy's not in our vocabulary," Jax chimed in, checking his equipment with the air of a man preparing for a doomed mission. "But sarcasm sure is." The crew suited up, each donning sleek, dark spacesuits that promised protection against the void and little else. Marin led the way, her expression set in that determined mask she wore when things got serious, or seriously screwed up. As they approached the alien structure, the weight of their decision settled like a stone in their collective stomachs. It loomed ahead, beckoning with the promise of answers and the threat of madness. "Remember, folks," Marin said, her voice crackling over their comms, "we're here to investigate, not to join the local cult of cosmic insanity. Follow my lead and keep your wits about you." "Wits? I left those back at the station," Jax responded, a nervous laugh threading through his words. "Then follow my lead and keep your sarcasm sharp," Marin replied, a hint of amusement in her tone. The interior of the structure was a maze of corridors and chambers, each more bizarre than the last. Alien symbols glowed faintly on the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced and shifted with their every step. "Feels like we're walking through a fever dream," Beck commented, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "More like a nightmare," Marin corrected, her hand resting on the hilt of her sidearm. "Stay alert." As they ventured deeper, the structure seemed to come alive around them. Lights flickered and pulsed, a visual heartbeat that thrummed in time with the signal that had lured them here. "There," Tamsin said, pointing to a console that looked like it had been designed by a committee of mad scientists and overly enthusiastic engineers. "That's the source." Marin approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat of doom. "All right, team, this is it. Can't wait to see what kind of cosmic prank this is," Jax muttered, his eyes scanning their surroundings for any signs of trouble. Tamsin's fingers flew over the alien controls, the symbols shifting and rearranging under her touch. "I think I can access it." "Just need a minute. 1 minute's about all the time we've got," Marin warned, feeling the weight of the structure's gaze on them. It wasn't alive, not in the traditional sense, but there was an intelligence here. Watching. Waiting. "Got it," Tamsin announced, her voice triumphant. "I've disabled the signal." For a brief, glorious second, relief surged through the crew like a wave. They'd done it. The ground trembled beneath their feet, cutting off their celebration before it could begin. What's happening?" Beck asked, his voice laced with panic. "Looks like we tripped a failsafe," Jax replied, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Typical. We push a button and the place is ready to self-destruct. Everyone back to the station," Marin ordered, her voice cutting through the rising chaos. They ran, feet pounding against the alien metal, as the structure began to shake itself apart. The signals that had once been a siren's call now screamed a warning, a shriek that pierced their minds and drove them faster, harder. The crew of listening post Z-107 didn't stop until they were safely back on their own rusted hunk of space junk, panting and gasping for breath. "Made it," Jax panted, collapsing into his chair with a relieved grin. "And here I thought today was gonna be boring." "Boring's not in our vocabulary either," Marin replied, her eyes on the stars beyond. "But survival sure is." As they watched the alien structure implode into itself, a spectacular display of light and destruction, Marin couldn't help but think that somewhere out there, the universe was having a good laugh at their expense. But for now, they were alive. And that was enough. The station creaked around Marin like an old ship at the mercy of a storm, only this wasn't water. It was the void of space, an abyss as indifferent to human suffering as a rock was to gravity. The signal was gone, sure, but the mess it had left behind was a different kind of nightmare. The kind that crept into your dreams and turned them sour. Jax slouched next to her, eyes on the flickering monitors. "So, Captain, what's the plan? Or are we just going to wait for the cosmic janitor to show up and clean this mess?" Marin rubbed her temples. Cosmic janitor. More like the cosmic executioner, given our luck. Beggars can't be choosers, Jax shrugged, peering at the tangled mess of wires Beck was wrestling with. Beck muttered something under his breath, something that sounded suspiciously like a curse aimed at the general concept of electricity. "Damn thing's worse than a cat on catnip," he grumbled, yanking a particularly stubborn cable as if it had personally offended him. "Careful, Beck," Marin warned. "You break it, you bought it." "Yeah, with what?" "Our non-existent paychecks." Beck shot back, glaring at the offending piece of tech like it owed him money. As if on cue, the lights flickered ominously, an unsubtle reminder that the sabotage was more than a minor inconvenience. It was like trying to patch a space suit with duct tape, temporary at best, suicidal at worst. Tamsin, never one to let chaos slow her down, was typing furiously at her console. Her glasses perched on her nose, she looked like a librarian on speed. "Life support's taking a hit," she announced, her voice as calm as ever. "We've got maybe a few hours before we're asphyxiation's next victims." "Great. Just enough time for a coffee break," Jax remarked dryly. "Too bad the machine's busted. I'm having a hard time deciding if that's sarcasm or a cry for help," Tamsin replied, not looking up from her screen. "Why not both?" Jax countered with a smirk. "All right, folks, enough with the comedy routine," Marin interjected, her tone all business. "We need a fix, and we need it 5 minutes ago. It's this damn signal," Beck growled, ripping another cable free with a satisfying snap. "It's like pouring sugar into a gas tank. Everything's gummed up, not to mention our brains," Jax added, tapping his temple. "Feels like someone's rewired my neurons with spaghetti." Marin scanned the room, her eyes landing on each of them in turn. "Any ideas?" Beck shrugged, gesturing at the chaos. "I can probably get life support running again, but we'll need to track down the source of the sabotage. Which means we've got a mole," Jax mused, eyes narrowing with the glee of a detective who'd watched one too many crime shows. "Someone's been playing double agent, yeah. And who exactly would want to sabotage this floating tin can?" Beck asked, skepticism dripping from his words. "We're not exactly a high-value target. Desperate times, desperate measures," Marin replied, her mind racing. "Whoever it is, they're counting on us falling apart." "Well, if sanity's the glue holding this crew together," Jax quipped, "we're in deep space without a thruster." Tamsin's fingers paused mid-keystroke. "I might have a lead. I've been monitoring comms traffic and there's been some unusual activity. Encrypted channels we didn't authorize. Could be our saboteur," Marin said, a glimmer of hope lighting her eyes. "Tamsin, see if you can trace it back." "On it," Tamsin replied, already lost in the data. Beck let out a frustrated sigh. "I'll see what I can do about the life support." "Just don't expect miracles. Miracles are for the naive," Marin said, a grim smile tugging at her lips. "We're just looking for a way to stay breathing." Time crawled by like a wounded beast, each minute stretching into eternity. The station groaned and creaked, a symphony of decay that spoke of rust and neglect. Somewhere, a loose panel clattered like a ghost's applause. "Good news," Tamsin announced, breaking the silence. "I've got a location. It's coming from the lower decks." "Of course it is," Jax remarked, rolling his eyes. "Why make it easy? Let's move," Marin ordered, striding towards the exit with all the determination of a general leading a charge. The lower decks were a maze of shadows and forgotten machinery. The kind of place where stories of ghosts and gremlins felt less like fiction and more like a polite suggestion. "Why does it have to be creepy?" Jax muttered, his voice echoing off the walls. "Welcome to horror movie set piece number 3, Beck replied dryly, shining his flashlight into the gloom. They moved cautiously, footsteps echoing in the confined space. Marin's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the urgency of their task. There, Tamsin whispered, pointing to a junction box that had been tampered with. Wires spilled from it like innards from a fresh kill. Looks like someone's been busy, Jax said, kneeling to examine the damage. Any sign of who? Marin asked, scanning the area for any clues. Beck squatted next to Jax, frowning at the mess. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. This isn't amateur work. Tamsin knelt beside them, her brow furrowed in concentration. The encryption on the comm signal was military grade. Whoever did this has serious skills. Marin's mind raced through the possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Could it be someone on our crew? Everyone here's got a past, Jax mused. Question is, who's desperate enough to sell us out, or who's got a reason to, Beck added, cutting another glance around the dimly lit room. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden clatter, a sound that sent their hearts racing and their hands to their weapons. Show yourself, Marin demanded, her voice cold and steady. For a moment there was only silence, then a figure stepped from the shadows, hands raised in mock surrender. Marin, the figure said, voice smooth and familiar. Rin, Marin sighed, recognizing the tone, the posture. It was Beck, or at least some version of him. What the hell are you doing? Beck's eyes were wild, a mix of fear and defiance. There's no time, Marin, you've got to hear me out. Talk fast, Marin replied, weapon still trained on him. Beck swallowed hard, the words tumbling out in a rush. It's the signal. It's messing with my head, all our heads. But I've found a way to stop it by sabotaging our life support. Jack snapped, disbelief etched on his face. It's the only way, Beck insisted. The signal's not just a message, it's a weapon. We've been compromised. Compromised how? Tamsin asked, her tone skeptical. Beck's eyes darted between them, searching for understanding. The signal's embedded in our systems, our minds. It's changing us, controlling us. That's a hell of a theory, Marin said. But it doesn't explain why you'd put us all at risk. Because if I didn't, we'd become something else, Beck replied, desperation bleeding into his voice. Something not human. The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating as the failing life support. Marin's mind churned with possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. What do we do? Jax asked, his voice small in the vastness of the dark. Beck looked at them, eyes pleading for trust. We cut the signal at the source. It's the only way to save us, to save everything. How? Tamsin demanded. We barely have power to keep breathing, let alone launch a counterattack. Beck hesitated, then nodded as if coming to a decision. I know a way. But it's a one-shot deal. Let me guess, Jax said, it involves more sabotage, more like surgical precision, Beck replied, a grim smile on his lips. Do it right and we'll be free. Do it wrong and we're done for. Marin's mind raced, weighing trust against survival, logic against instinct. The station trembled around them, a reminder that time was not on their side. All right, Beck, Marin decided, holstering her weapon. We're with you. Let's give this one last shot. Beck nodded, determination setting his features like stone. Okay, let's end this. The journey back to the control room was a blur of flickering lights and racing thoughts. The station's groans seemed louder, more accusatory, as if it knew they were nearing a breaking point. Life support's critical, Tamsin announced as they reached the controls. We've got minutes, maybe. Then we make them count, Marin replied, hands flying over the console. Beck dived into the wiring, fingers moving with a confidence born of desperation. Sweat trickled down his brow as he worked, each second a gamble with their lives. Almost there, he muttered, connecting the final wires with a snap. The station shuddered, a deep rumble that shook the walls and rattled their bones. For a moment, it felt like it might all fall apart, but then the trembling ceased. It's done, Beck said, his voice a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. The lights stabilized, the air purifiers hummed back to life, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the crew. We did it, Jax grinned, disbelief mingling with joy. We actually did it. Marin allowed herself a rare smile, the weight of their survival settling like a gentle burden on her shoulders. We're not out of the woods yet, but we've got a fighting chance. Tamsin looked at Beck, respect in her eyes. Hell of a gamble, but it paid off. Yeah, Beck replied, his smile shaky but genuine. Guess we're all addicted to surviving. As they stood together, the station around them breathing life once more, Marin knew that their journey was far from over. But for now, they had each other, and they had hope. And in the void of space, that was enough to light the darkness. The hum of the station settled into an uneasy lull, like the breath of a patient fresh out of surgery. The crew huddled in the control room, each wrestling with the gnawing uncertainty of their predicament. The station might have been ticking along again, but they were acutely aware it was on borrowed time. Dr. Tamsin Rowe, usually as cool as a cryo chamber, was squinting at her console with the kind of focus that suggested either a groundbreaking discovery or an exceptionally stubborn Sudoku puzzle. "I think I've found something," she said, voice cutting through the room like a lifeline. "Please tell me it's not another reason we're all screwed," Jax quipped, leaning against the wall like a man who just learned his house was termite-ridden. "Better," Tamsin replied, barely glancing up. "It's a message hidden in the signal. Oh, great secret messages," Beck muttered. "Next thing you'll tell me is the station's haunted." "Not quite, but close," Tamsin continued, her fingers dancing over the keys like a pianist with a vendetta. "This signal isn't just a fluke. It's intentional, and it's exploiting something uniquely human like our penchant for self-destruction." Marin asked, sarcasm serving as her armor. "Something like that," Tamsin nodded. "The signal taps into our primal fears, loss of control, isolation. It's a psychological weapon disguised as an ordinary blip." "Well, that's a relief," Jack said, his smile as brittle as the air supply. "For a second there, I thought it might be something serious." Marin leaned over, peering at the screen. "How do you counter a weapon like that?" "By being human," Tamsin replied. "We're the problem, but we're also the solution. We exploit our own weaknesses," Beck snorted. "So we out-crazy the crazy," something like that, Tamsin said. "There's a pattern. If we can disrupt it, maybe we can weaken its hold." Marin's mind whirred with possibilities, each more absurd than the last. "What do we need?" "Imagination," Tamsin shrugged. "And a little bit of madness." "Good thing we're amateurs at sanity," Jax added, scratching the stubble on his chin. "I've got an idea," Beck said, his voice taking on a rare note of inspiration. "What if we reverse the polarity of the signal, turn its effects back on itself?" "Isn't that a bit Star Trek?" Jax asked, eyebrow raised. "Next, you'll be telling me to reroute power through the deflector dish." Beck shrugged, a grin tugging at his lips. "It's crazy, but what have we got to lose? Breathable air, functioning organs, our last shred of dignity." Jax ticked off on his fingers. "All right, enough," Marin cut in. "Beck, do you think you can make this work?" "Maybe," Beck admitted. "If we can isolate the signal's frequency and bounce it back, we might be able to short-circuit its effect." "Then let's get on it," Marin said, her voice a low growl of determination. "Tamsin, you coordinate with Beck. Jax, make sure we don't lose life support again. I'll handle communications, see if I can get through to anyone who might give a damn." "Right on it," Jax replied with mock enthusiasm. "I'll just add miracle worker to my resume." As they dispersed to their tasks, the station felt less like a death sentence and more like a challenge. Each step they took was a defiance against the void, a refusal to be swallowed by the abyss. Beck and Tamsin huddled over the console, their minds a tangled web of ideas and technical jargon. "If we can adjust the dampening field's parameters," Tamsin suggested, "we might be able to create a feedback loop." "And if it doesn't work?" Beck asked, his tone wary but intrigued. "Then we've got front row seats to the end of the world," Tamsin replied dryly. "Sounds fun," Beck said, his grin mirroring hers. "Let's get to it." While Tamsin and Beck toiled over the signal's secrets, Jax prowled the station, checking for any signs of further sabotage. "You'd think with all this technology, we'd at least get a warning bell," he muttered, inspecting a panel of blinking lights. "Instead, we're stuck playing space roulette." Meanwhile, Marin sat at the comm console, fingers drumming an impatient rhythm as she tried to reach a higher authority. "Any higher authority?" "This is listening post Z107. She repeated into the ether. "We're dealing with a compromised signal affecting crew stability. Do you copy?" The void, as always, remained indifferent. Ears bled into each other, the hum of the station a constant reminder of their tenuous grasp on survival. It was the sort of situation where hope had to be rationed like oxygen, or else it'd be gone before you knew it. "Tamsin, you got any good news?" Marin called, breaking the silence. "Depends on your definition," Tamsin replied. "We think we've got the pattern cracked." "Just need to test it." "Define test," Jack said, leaning against the doorway with a cynical smirk. "Well, we're going to try and reverse engineer the signal," Beck explained. "Kind of like trying to unscramble an egg. So, a recipe for disaster," Jax chuckled. "Perfect. Basically, we're going to give the signal a taste of its own medicine," Beck continued. "And hope it chokes." "Fine by me," Marin said, her voice steely with resolve. "Just make sure we don't go down with it." As they prepared to implement their plan, the atmosphere in the room shifted from desperation to something almost resembling hope. Almost. "All right, let's do this thing," Beck said, his fingers flying over the controls with the precision of a man who dismantled and rebuilt this station in his sleep. "Reversing polarity in 3, 2, 1, Tamsin counted down, her voice steady. The station shuddered, lights flickering like a dying star. For a moment it felt as if the universe held its breath, waiting to see if they'd tip the balance. "Anything?" Marin asked, tension coiling in her voice. "Hold on," Beck said, eyes glued to the readouts. It's working." The signal's losing strength. A collective exhale swept through the room, a fragile victory in the vast expanse of space. "We did it," Jax asked, disbelief tainting his tone. "We actually did it," Tamsin confirmed, a rare smile gracing her lips. Marin allowed herself a small nod, acknowledging the fragile thread of hope they'd managed to spin. "All right, let's keep it together. We've got a chance now. Let's not waste it." The station's hum settled into a gentle drone, a lullaby of machinery that suggested maybe they weren't completely doomed after all. Beck leaned back, exhaustion lining his features. "You know, I never thought I'd miss the days when our biggest problem was a clogged nutrient dispenser. Even that thing was better than this," Jax agreed, stretching his arms. "At least it didn't try to kill us." "We need a plan," Marin interrupted, cutting through the banter. "We've bought ourselves time, but we're not safe yet, so what's next?" Beck asked, eyes flicking to Marin. "Now we figure out who sent that signal and why," Marin replied, determination sharpening her voice. "Because we're not just going to roll over and let some alien mind tricks take us out." "Damn right," Jax added, a fierce grin lighting up his face. "We're human. We kick ass and take names, even in space," Tamsin added dryly, shaking her head at their bravado. As they regrouped, the urgency of their mission settled over them like a second skin. They might have been battered, but they weren't broken. Not yet. And as they plotted, planned, and prepared to strike back, the dark, yawning void seemed just a little less daunting. Because even in the bleakest of places, with the odds stacked against them, humans had a knack for finding a way. In the end, it wasn't the lack of oxygen or technology that defined them, but their relentless refusal to give up. Their sheer, stubborn defiance in the face of the impossible. Because that's what humans did best. For now they had a plan, they had hope, and most importantly, they had each other. And in the endless, uncaring void of space, that was more than enough. "Let's show them what we're made of," Marin said, her voice a low, fierce promise. "Yeah," Jax grinned, "let's make them wish they'd picked another galaxy to mess with." As they set their course, the station thrummed with a new energy. A defiant heartbeat in the silence of the cosmos, ready to take on whatever came next. Because in the grimdark reaches of space, one thing was clear. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. Not today, not ever. Listening post Z107 was the kind of place you'd expect to find in a bad sci-fi comedy, if you were lucky. But today it felt like the set of a grimdark epic, where the stakes were real, and the laughs were borrowed from the last vestiges of sanity. The plan was simple, in theory. Create a counter-signal to disrupt the addictive frequencies sent by the aliens. Simple, like juggling chainsaws while blindfolded. Beck Rin, the station's go-to-fix-it guy, was elbow-deep in wires and circuits, looking like a man who just discovered his sandwich had been made with stale bread. "If this works, I'm buying myself a medal," he muttered, a grim smile playing on his lips. "You know they don't give medals for suicide missions, right?" Jax quipped, leaning against a panel as if it might collapse under his weight just for the sheer hilarity of it. "Good thing I'm a volunteer then," Beck shot back, his fingers working magic or madness on the console. Marin Weiler, our fearless captain whose optimism was as extinct as the dodo, paced like a caged tiger. "Focus, people. Let's make sure this doesn't go sideways." Tamsin Rowe, ever the calm in the storm, nodded at her console. "I've run the numbers. This should work." She paused, giving the rest of the sentence a dramatic pause that only heightens the sense of impending doom. "Or we'll create a feedback loop that'll scramble our brains more than a college bender. Who needs a fully functional brain anyway?" Jax smirked, earning a glare from Marin that could have melted the hull. "Speak for yourself." "I happen to like my neurons where they are," Beck grunted, tapping in commands with the kind of precision that spoke of desperation more than confidence. The station's hum was the soundtrack of their impending doom, but it also carried the undercurrent of hope, a dangerous but necessary delusion. They'd already set the groundwork, isolating the alien signal's frequency with the kind of precision that would have made a heart surgeon look sloppy. Now it was time to send it right back, with interest. "Signals set," Tamsin confirmed, her fingers flying over the keys with a dexterity that suggested she might have been a concert pianist in another life. "Let's give those aliens a taste of their own medicine," Marin said, her eyes narrowing like a predator's sizing up its prey. Beck finished the last of the adjustments, stepping back with a satisfied nod. "Ready when you are, Captain." Marin took a deep breath, the kind you take when you're about to plunge into an ice-cold lake. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute." The station shuddered as the counter-signal launched, a low thrumming hum that seemed to vibrate in their bones. The lights flickered, and for a moment it felt like the universe was holding its breath, watching to see if the little humans would pull off the impossible. "Anything?" Jax asked, his usual sarcasm replaced by a sliver of hope. Beck studied the readouts with a mix of awe and disbelief. "It's working." "The signal's losing coherence." Tamsin nodded, her lips twitching in a small, triumphant smile. "We did it. We're disrupting the feedback loop." Marin allowed herself a rare grin, the kind that felt foreign after so long without use. "We might actually survive this." The room erupted in a ragged cheer, the kind that comes from people who'd been staring death in the face and decided to punch it in the nose for good measure. But even as the thrill of victory buzzed in their veins, Marin's mind was already racing ahead. They'd won a battle, but the war was far from over. "All right, let's keep our wits about us. We've neutralized the immediate threat, but we still need to figure out who sent that signal and why." Jax leaned back, exuding a confidence that suggested he already had a plan. "Any chance it's just some bored alien teenagers playing a prank?" "I doubt it," Tamsin said dryly. "This kind of signal requires resources. Someone wanted us out of the picture." "Well, they picked the wrong crew to mess with," Beck said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's find out who these bastards are and give 'em hell." "The station's still running diagnostics," Tamsin noted. "It'll take time before we're back to full operational capacity." Marin nodded, pacing as her mind whirred like a badly oiled machine. "All right, Beck, see if you can coax a little more juice out of our systems. Tamsin, monitor any frequencies for retaliation. Jax, keep an eye on life support." "You got it, boss," Jax replied, already heading to his post with a swagger that suggested he might be imagining himself in a western, spurs and all. Beck, meanwhile, dove back into the tangled mess of wires and circuits, muttering under his breath like a man in a bad relationship with technology. "Just once, I'd like things to work the way they are supposed to." Tamsin chuckled, her eyes never leaving the monitors. "And miss out on all this excitement. Where's your sense of adventure? In a bottle of whiskey, where it belongs, Beck shot back, his fingers moving with the kind of precision that came from working on a station held together by duct tape and hope. As the hours ticked by, the crew settled into the kind of rhythm that only comes from facing death and deciding to live anyway. The void outside pressed in, a reminder of their isolation, but inside the station, there was a sense of camaraderie that made even the darkness seem bearable. Marin checked the comms, her fingers tapping out a pattern as she tried to reach anyone who might be listening. This is listening post Z-107 broadcasting to any nearby vessels. We've neutralized an alien signal, requesting assistance and information. The comms hissed, a static-filled symphony that carried no answers, only the vast indifference of space. Still nothing? Jax asked, his voice carrying over from his makeshift station. Nope, Marin replied, her tone as dry as the inside of a sandblaster. But at least the silence isn't trying to kill us this time. Small victories, Beck said, pausing to wipe the sweat from his brow. We'll take what we can get. As the station's system slowly came back to life, the crew took stock of their situation. The immediate threat had passed, but questions lingered like a bad hangover. All right, we're stable for now, Marin said, gathering the crew around the central console. But we need to figure out our next move. We can't just sit here twiddling our thumbs. Beck leaned in, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion etched into his features. We could try to trace the signal's origin, see where it came from. Assuming they didn't cover their tracks, Tamsin added, her fingers tapping a steady rhythm on the console. Jax folded his arms, his expression thoughtful. Even if they did, someone somewhere knows something. We just need to find the right thread to pull. Then let's start pulling, Marin said, her voice a low growl of determination. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've got a chance. The crew dispersed, each returning to their stations with a renewed sense of purpose. The battle might have been won, but the war was just beginning. And if there was one thing the crew of Listening Post Z-107 excelled at, it was defying the odds. Iors bled into each other, the stations hum a constant reminder of their fragile existence. But beneath the surface, there was a current of hope, a belief that they might actually pull this off. Got something, Tamsin said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet like a laser scalpel. A faint trace. It looks like it's coming from a system not too far from here. Marin was at her side in an instant, her eyes scanning the data with the kind of focus that left no room for doubt. Can we get a clear read? I'll need to boost the signal, Tamsin replied, already tapping in commands. But it's a start. Beck nodded, his expression one of grim determination. Then let's follow the trail. See where it leads. Jax leaned back, a grin playing on his lips. And when we find them, we'll make sure they know messing with humans is a bad idea. Sounds like a plan, Marin said, her voice a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Let's show them what we're made of. With renewed purpose, the crew set to work, the station thrumming with the kind of energy that spoke of defiance more than desperation. They might have been outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something the aliens didn't, sheer, stubborn humanity. And as they traced the signal back to its source, ready to face whatever lay ahead, one thing was clear. They weren't going down without a fight. Not today, not ever. The station was quieter now, a silence punctuated by the occasional beeping of consoles and the gentle hum of machinery that said, "Hey, we're not dead yet." Marin leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her expression one part relief and two parts skepticism, like a cat that survived a fall but was still considering the merits of 9 lives. So we alive, or is this one of those post-mortem hallucinations? Jax quipped, slouching in a chair that looked like it might give up and collapse at any moment. We're alive, Marin confirmed, her tone as dry as a Martian desert. Alive and still in the middle of nowhere, Beck emerged from his tangle of wires, his hair a mess that screamed, "I fight machines for a living." He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, leaving smudges that matched the grime on his face. Could be worse. We could be alive and on fire. Inspiring as always, Tamsin chimed in, her eyes glued to her monitor. "There's beauty in not dying, you know. Beauty's overrated," Marin muttered, pushing off the wall. She glanced around at her crew, the ragtag bunch that had somehow managed to stave off death yet again. "We need to debrief, figure out what the hell just happened to us and make sure it doesn't happen again. Assuming we get out of this tin can alive," Beck added, ever the optimist. "Let's not count our exploding chickens before they hatch," Jax said, twiddling a pen between his fingers with the casual air of someone who might actually have faith in their survival. Marin didn't bother with a response. Instead, she motioned for them to gather around the central console, their makeshift campfire in this high-tech wilderness. "All right, Doc, enlighten us. What have we learned from our near-death escapade?" Dr. Tamsin Rowe, calm as always, tapped a few keys, bringing up a holographic display of the alien signal's data. The signal was a psychological weapon, exploiting our primal fears and cravings to degrade our mental faculties. "Sounds like a party," Jax quipped. "A really bad one." "Focus," Marin snapped, though there was a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Doc, what else? Whoever sent it knew exactly what buttons to push," Tamsin continued, ignoring Jax's interruption. "They're either very familiar with human psychology or they're just really good at guessing." "Wonderful," Beck grumbled. "An alien race that's either genius psychologists or lucky bastards." "They underestimated us," Marin said, her voice carrying a steely edge. "They didn't count on us fighting back, or being too stubborn to just roll over and die," Jax added, earning an approving nod from Beck. Tamsin adjusted the display, her fingers dancing over the keyboard with practiced ease. "I've compiled our findings into a report. We need to share this with the rest of humanity. It's the only way to prevent this kind of exploitation in the future." "Assuming we survive long enough to share it," Beck chimed in, because optimism was clearly not in his job description. "Assuming we survive," Marin agreed. "But first things first, we need to find a way back into contact with civilization. And maybe figure out a way to keep them from trying this again. Plan B, make sure they regret it if they do," Jax said with a grin that was more teeth than joy. Marin nodded, appreciating the sentiment if not the likelihood. "For now, we need to keep our systems running and our heads clear. Tamsin, finish up that report." "Jax, Beck, see if you can boost our comms somehow." "On it, Captain," Jax replied, giving a mock salute before heading back to his station. Beck followed suit, trudging towards the comms array with all the enthusiasm of a man going to the dentist. "If it explodes, I'm blaming Jax." "It's always Jax's fault," Tamsin said without looking up, her fingers still flying over the console. "Hey, I'm right here," Jax protested, even as he flicked switches and adjusted dials like he was born to it. "And we love you anyway," Marin said, her voice softening just a fraction. "We all made it out of this alive. That's more than anyone expected. Question is, what do we do next?" Beck asked, peering at a particularly stubborn wire like it might suddenly decide to cooperate. "We find out who sent that signal," Marin said, her voice hard as titanium. "And we make sure they can't do it again." "Right," Jax said, leaning back in his chair. Just another normal day in the cosmos. The crew settled into a rhythm, their movements a symphony of survival. The station around them seemed to breathe a little easier, the tension of imminent disaster fading like a bad dream. But beneath the calm surface, there was an undercurrent of determination, a drive to understand what had happened and make sure it never happened again. As the Iors rolled on, the station's systems hummed to life with renewed vigor. Tamsin finished compiling her report, her expression one of satisfaction tempered by the weight of their discoveries. Beck and Jax managed to coax a little more life out of the comms, enough to make contact with nearby human settlements at least a theoretical possibility. Marin watched it all with a sense of pride that was tempered by caution. They'd come through the fire, but the embers still glowed, and she wasn't about to let her guard down just yet. "Captain," Tamsin called, her voice breaking the silence with the soft authority of a librarian shushing a rowdy patron. "The report's ready. If we can get it out, it'll be a warning to the rest of humanity." "Good work, Doc," Marin said, her voice warm despite the situation. "Let's hope someone out there is listening." "Someone will be," Jax assured her, fiddling with the comms as if sheer willpower could make them work. "And if not, we'll just shout really loud." Beck rolled his eyes but kept quiet, his focus on the delicate dance of circuits and wires. Sometimes, silence was the best way to show agreement. Eventually, the station's systems were as stable as they were likely to get, and the crew gathered once more, a huddle of weary survivors in the vast emptiness of space. "We've done all we can for now," Marin said, her voice carrying a note of finality. "But we need to stay vigilant. We've beaten back the immediate threat, but there's no guarantee we're in the clear." "Paranoia looks good on you, Captain," Jax said, flashing a grin that was all mischief. "It's not paranoia if they are really out to get you," Marin shot back, a rare smile breaking through her stern facade. "And they definitely are," Beck added, because it was tradition at this point. The crew shared a moment of quiet camaraderie, a rare respite from the chaos that had been their lives for as long as they could remember. They'd faced death and come out the other side, a little more battered but still standing. As the station drifted through the void, Marin took a moment to reflect. They'd averted disaster, at least for now, but the future remained uncertain. The universe was vast and indifferent, a place where survival was never guaranteed. But they weren't alone. They had each other, a motley crew of stubborn, clever, irreverent humans who refused to go quietly into that good night. And as long as they had that, they had hope. "All right, let's keep our eyes open and our wits about us," Marin said, breaking the silence with the kind of authority that came from experience. "We've got a long way to go, but we'll get there. Together." And as the station continued its journey through the stars, the crew settled back into their routines, ready to face whatever came next with the same determination that had seen them through their darkest hour. They might have been a small speck in the grand cosmos, but they were a speck that refused to be snuffed out. And that, in the end, was what mattered most.